Welcome and hello from Alex, with a story from r/ProRevenge, where a betrayed employee turns the tables on his adulterous boss with a cunning plan involving incriminating photographs. Coming up next is a story from NoCat2980. Boss tried to sleep with my fiancé. This was several years ago. So my boss, an extreme type of personality, found out I was seeing a young lady at another one of our offices. It was a long-distance relationship. He was the type he liked to control everything and mess with people for fun. He was also married to another employee, but he was very unfaithful. And he had a hobby, photography. He liked to take pics of himself and his conquest in the act. Then he would show the pics around the production floor and brag about it. Well, on his next trip to this other office, he tried to get my girlfriend to sleep with him, but she spurned him. He made up some lies and got her fired. It took a long time, but I was patient. I knew he kept the photos in his office. He could not risk keeping them at home where his wife might stumble upon them. One Saturday I was working overtime and the cleaning lady came through. They unlocked his office. I came in acting like I was taking dimensions on some drawings. The lady just asked me to close the door when I was finished. She left and went down toward accounting. That's when I went through his desk. Sure enough, in the back of one drawer I found a stack of photos 4 tall. I took them all. Then I waited until he went on another trip. When he did, I went out for lunch. I had a dozen pics of him in the act with 4 different women, all showing his face. The women all had dark or red hair. His wife is a blonde. I drove to the town he lived in, to the closest post office to his house, and mailed the pics to his wife with no return address. She divorced him, and her lawyer took him to the cleaners. My girlfriend is now my wife, and we aren't mad anymore. Wow, that's a wild story. Opie definitely took a big risk going after their boss like that. On the one hand, their boss sounds like a complete jerk, trying to sleep with someone's fiancé, then getting them fired when they refuse. That's despicable, and the whole photography hobby is just creepy. On the other hand, taking someone's private photos and using them to potentially destroy their marriage is a serious move. There's always the chance it could backfire. But knowing the boss's character and the way he treated people, it's hard not to feel a bit satisfied with the outcome. Maybe Opie could have gone to HR or reported the boss's behavior directly, but knowing his personality, maybe they didn't think that would work. In the end, they took matters into their own hands in a very dramatic way. Risky, but effective. And hey, they got their happy ending with their wife. So, while the methods were unconventional, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Coming up next is a story from TravelingABC. Former manager made my life hell and I finally got her fired. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. When I was offered a new role, I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great, and that part has not changed. However, since my manager Gary was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane. I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, move, cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said I was big for my race. The list of personal slights so long that it filled 3 pages. I would talk back to her and she did not like that, and that provoked her more. I only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. Finally, I had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team who I didn't know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy and couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised considering half her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him. I was thrilled. Well, turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I am not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter and stapled the list of Jane's offensive comments and CC entitled "Dad Everyone." Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try to keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go and he did not have authority to let her go. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done. So I left, loudly and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for 3 months. There were nights we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and emergency expenses from a health crisis and a funeral. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying to 5 minutes 10 roles per day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company I just left. I used to work with this guy closely and texted him a congrats. Let me know if you need any insights on the new place. We had a quick call where I told him some ins and outs, where I thought they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff. I accepted. Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new big shot in a giant conference room. In Big Shot's speech, he breezed over that I'll be his chief of staff, along with a few key names. I now sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently, within the 3 months I was not there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent Big Shot an email about how I am an unqualified idiot, that I used to work for her, how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects I lied to get ahead. She didn't even try to be fake nice. Big Shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know, I was a director at Big Shot's competitor company and was already a level above her, so 2 levels isn't a big leap, and I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour call with Big Shot and told him she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general, but the evidence he needed was Gary confirming that her whole team has turned over. My prior resignation letter, which was still sitting on my desktop when I logged in upon return, and a few other nasty emails she sent her recent staff, which they were happy to share with us. Big Shot fired Jane on Friday. This OP character definitely went through the ringer with Jane. Being micromanaged and verbally abused is awful, especially when it comes from a superior. It sounds like OP tried to stand up for themselves, but with no luck. So, good on them for documenting everything and using it later. Leaving the company and then getting the chance to return in a much higher position. That's some serious karma right there. And the fact that Jane basically handed OP the evidence they needed to get her fired. Icing on the cake. Sure, things were rough for a while, but seeing Jane get what she deserved must have been incredibly satisfying. OP played a long game and won. Maybe not ideal to have to leave in the first place, but coming back with the authority to clean house. Now that's a story for the ages. Coming up next is a story from StrugglebusRN, and if you like the video so far, don't forget to like the video. It only takes a second and helps me out a lot. When I wrote my dad's obituary, I didn't mention my mom and exposed her years of abuse and neglect. I originally posted this in Petty Revenge, but it was removed, so I am guessing it's more appropriate for here. My dad died December 1st, 2022. He briefly lived with me before his passing after a long stint of being chronically ill for the past 15+ years. As his health declined, he relied more on my mom for things. Prior to this, she was never a great person and fully took advantage of his disability and mobility issues as he declined. For years, she claimed to be separated and divorced, talking to other men on the internet. She made claims many times she was going to move away and marry someone else. In addition, she took advantage of him financially. We tried every legal avenue we could find to have her kicked out, arrested, or force her out, but those attempts were met with responses that it was a civil matter and there was nothing that could be done. He made me durable POA and added me to all his accounts. This is a small portion of her abuse, but I promise her actions were no less than neglectful and exploited. I'd tried for years to get my dad to move in with me, but he wasn't leaving the house he worked so hard to pay for. I brought him home on hospice the day after Thanksgiving and made sure his final days were the best they could be. After meeting with the funeral home to carry out his final wishes, I was told they required consent from my mother to allow me to cremate him. It was no surprise she initially told me no and only agreed after I allowed her to keep the Social Security survivor benefits, which would have been hers anyway. I wrote his obituary and left her out of it. There was not a single word or mention he'd ever been married or had a spouse. I didn't feel she deserved to be recognized or viewed as a grieving widow when she spent their marriage as a shitty spouse and person. She lost her mind, and there were many questions from friends and family alike. I've spent years in therapy working through maternal narcissistic abuse and believe if she didn't want me to talk about it, she shouldn't have done it. When people asked about it, I was honest about the years of abuse my father and I endured from her. I've completely ruined the public image and victim complex she spent years creating. I might be the villain in awe in this scenario, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Wow, that's a tough one. Opie definitely went through a lot with their mom. On the one hand, leaving their mom out of the obituary entirely feels pretty cutting. It's understandable, given what Opie describes, but it also removes her from their dad's life story altogether. On the other hand, if what Opie says is true, the mom's behavior sounds pretty awful. Using his illness to her advantage, neglecting him, and exploiting him financially is terrible. Opie clearly feels strongly about protecting their dad's memory and exposing their mom's actions. So, justified. It depends on how you look at it. Opie's actions were extreme, but the situation sounds extreme too. They were in a difficult position and took a very personal approach to dealing with it. Ultimately, it's Opie's story to tell, and if this is how they chose to honor their dad, well, that's their right. It's a complex situation with no easy answers. Coming up next is a story from WildBillyredneck. Lunch thieves just dessert. Years ago I had a lunch thief. About the 12th time complaining to HR about people stealing my lunch, I was seething. Not a damn thing was being done and I still had to go buy something to eat. I was bitching to my doctor at the yearly checkup and he got a smile saying, "You're constipated then." I was dumb and said no. Why? He wrote me a prescription for some holy fuck laxative with instructions to mix it in with your meal for maximum effect, at which point I knew the plan. I wish I could say they shat their pants, but no, they ate my sandwich with special avocado sauce. About an hour after lunch, I went to HR and reported 2 things. 1, my lunch was stolen again, and 2, my medication was stolen. HR: so you got hit by the lunch thief again and your medicine was in the bag. Me: yes, I have had some digestive problems and my doctor prescribed a powerful laxative and advised me to mix it in with my midday meal. HR going white: you what? Me smiling: I mixed in a prescription grade laxative with my food per doctor's orders. Well, being that stealing prescribed medication is a criminal offense, the police were called and found the lead man from a department over absolutely shitting his brains out. He was furious and accused me of poisoning his food. I asked, at which point did you get the idea that food was for you? Continued: furthermore, now I no longer have my medication I was prescribed for my condition. It was about this time he knew he fucked up and shut his mouth until he got a lawyer, or so I'm told. One of my buddies from high school took his position. I can make and eat my hoagies and I have no clue where lunch thief went after his fines and community service. That's incredible. This Opie character sounds like a real firecracker. Being the victim of a lunch thief repeatedly is enough to make anyone see red. But taking it to that level with the laxatives, genius, maybe a bit unorthodox, but undeniably effective. Of course, there's always a chance it could have backfired, but facing a potential lawsuit versus the immediate and, explosive consequences Opie delivered, no wonder the thief shut his mouth. Honestly, good for Opie. Sometimes you gotta take matters into your own hands, especially when HR seems content to do nothing. And hey, free promotion for Opie's friend. The story does raise an eyebrow about the laxative reaching the wrong hands. But between the stolen food and medication, it's hard not to cheer for Opie getting their lunch situation resolved, with a side of justice, of course. Coming up next is a story from predtech. Stick me with hidden charges. I'll show you. So this past Christmas, my missus and I purchased one of our 9-year-old son's Santa gifts from a certain UK sports retail company that also have many stores here in Ireland as well. It was a football rebounder, kinda like a trampoline that you kick the ball at and it bounces back to you. Anyway, we purchased it from their Irish website and thought nothing more of it. A few days go by and we get a notification from a certain brown uniformed courier company that there are customs charges due on something. And as you can imagine, we've bought many things for the kids, so we had to double check what we've ordered, and we didn't have anything left that was being imported, so we naturally assumed it was a scam. So I told the wife to call the company and find out who shipped it, and it was a different courier company based in the UK. After a bit of digging and investigating, it turns out that it's our rebounder. They had shipped it from the UK, via a local carrier, to the brown uniformed guys to deliver to us. Now, my wife and I are both on disability, so an additional charge of almost €50 when you're both already on a fixed income is harsh, especially at Christmas, so I told her to pay it and I'd deal with the retailer. The first day I called, I had to call 3 times, being stuck on hold for at least 20 minutes each time, but I was patient and polite because I've worked in a call center before, so I knew those people are only doing their job. But I asked to speak to a manager and was promised a call back each time. That never happened. The second day was quite similar. The third day I was starting to get annoyed, so called back, waiting even longer on hold, and finally wasn't taking this shit any longer. I told the rep that all I wanted was the €50 back because our consumer rights in Ireland dictate that a person must be informed of any additional charges on a purchase, at the very latest, by the final checkout screen. And in this case there was nothing to show that, and I could easily replicate that issue by putting the same item in my basket and going all the way to the checkout screen again, and there was nothing saying we'd have to pay import charges. The rep was indifferent to the situation but tried to help, and what he said sent me over the edge. He offered me a measly €20 gift voucher to use on their website. But more importantly, he read a statement to me. He said we advise our customers that there may be DDU charges on any item that gets shipped outside of the UK. Then I asked him where it states this information and he paused, then said he didn't actually know. I said, well, I know one thing. It doesn't say it anywhere on this transaction because I've checked, and because this is a violation of my consumer rights, I am going to give your company one last chance to make this right. Have your manager call me within the next 60 minutes or I am going to post this entire debacle on LinkedIn and link every senior officer in your company. Then I hung up the phone and waited. Yet again, no call. The next day I went on LinkedIn and followed through on my promise. I created a post detailing what they had done by sticking us with hidden charges and that they were ignoring our requests for a manager and everything they said and did. Then I tagged every senior officer at that company, from the regional managers through the European directors all the way to the CEO, and I shamed them for how they operate their company. This, ladies and gentlemen, was now an act of war. Shortly after I posted, then I noticed that they took down the item from their website in an attempt to hide this, but they must have thought in a simpleton that doesn't understand how the internet works. They didn't realize that when you searched for rebounder on their site, that it shows the item in question, so I took a screenshot of that. Then another of the item page that was now missing. But then I did a Google cache search for the same page and found a version from 2 days prior happily showing the item. Then I added a comment to my original post highlighting how they were trying to hide it with the evidence and trolling them for their heinous behavior, especially at Christmas. Then I tagged and shamed all the senior officers again. And at this point it was really starting to get some attention, not only publicly, but 3 people in incognito mode viewed my profile. I wonder who they could have been. So naturally I took a screenshot of the 3 mysterious visitors listed on my profile and did the same thing. Commented on my own post highlighting it and trolling them for their incompetence. The next morning I got a call from a senior exec at their head office in the UK, practically licking my boots with apologies, asking what she can do to make this right. I told her I originally only wanted my €50 back as it wasn't fair, nor even legal, that I had to pay. But since I had to go to such lengths to get their attention, now I wanted my €50 back, a full refund on my entire purchase, and I wanted to keep the product. That was the only thing that would make this go away. She asked for a couple of hours to fix it and I said okay. About an hour later I got another call from her, again apologizing. She asked for my PayPal address where she sent the €50, then she refunded the whole purchase, and she let us keep the product. Obviously I thanked her for her help because at that stage I was just happy it was over. But I'll be fucked if I'll let anyone walk all over my family, even if they are a £58 million annual company. The most of the story here is, don't take bullshit from anyone. I may be just one man, but my son's view of Santa is far more valuable to me than the opinion of some retail chain that doesn't care about its customers nor how it operates ethically. Wow, that was a wild ride. Opie definitely went above and beyond to get that €50 back. It sounds like they were stuck between a rock and a hard place, having to deal with a company that wasn't exactly forthcoming about the extra charges. Personally, I can't blame Opie for getting frustrated. Being stuck on hold for hours and then being offered a measly gift voucher instead of a proper resolution would try anyone's patience. Taking it to LinkedIn and calling them out publicly was a bold move, but it sounds like it got the results Opie was looking for. Opie definitely pushed the envelope, but in the end, they got their money back, kept the product, and hopefully made that company think twice about how they treat their customers. So, yeah, good on Opie for sticking up for themselves and their family. That wraps up r/ProRevenge. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to visit my Spotify channel, link is in the description, so you can listen to the best Reddit story while being outside, and remember to hit that subscribe button.